They soar on borrowed winds, chasing horizons that never arrive, not in the grounding that turns visions into vessels, not where the soul plants seeds. You see them in midnight musings, drafting symphonies of possibility that echo only in their minds. You see them in fleeting alliances, ignited by shared dreams, all enveloping until the soil of commitment calls and they ascend. They pursue the infinite, but evade the earth. They blueprint utopias, but shun the foundation. They're not visionless, they're not inert. They're paradoxical. A spirit with wings of wonder, devoted to the ethereal, but rootless, terrified of the dirt that nurtures. Carl Jung glimpsed this as the eternal dreamer, an archetype woven into the human psyche. The eternal dreamer isn't just one who wanders in fantasy. They are one who embodies the paradox of flight without foundation. Wings that lift but never land, possibility that dazzles but never solidifies. So they glide. They keep existence in eternal ascent, never fully alighting on anything, never rooting their brilliance in the mundane. For rooting demands surrender, and surrender demands the pruning of boundless skies. And that, to the dreamer, is suffocation. They dwell in the ether of what might unfold, and the instant gravity tugs, they take flight. But how does one become this winged wanderer? Let's descend to the origins. The eternal dreamer often sprouts from a childhood either elevated on pedestals of unchecked fancy or starved of stable soil and sometimes a bitter blend. In unchecked fancy, they are lofted with praise but denied the weight of consequence. They are inspired but never tethered. Their flights are encouraged, their crashes averted. They never learn the art of landing because cushions are perpetual. Thus, reality becomes a chasm, not for its thorns, but for its unyielding pull. Then there's the other soil, the neglected dreamer. They're not rooted in security. They're scattered like seeds on wind. Perhaps caregivers are fleeting shadows. Perhaps upheaval uproots the home, so they ascend inward. They craft aerial kingdoms. They become skybound, and those kingdoms become their only anchorage, the one realm untouched by erosion. In both terrains, the dreamer never forges roots into maturity. They never learn to embed their flights in fertile ground. They evade adulthood not because they're whimsical, but because adulthood signals confinement, shortfall, or the death of boundless air. So what do? They remain aloft. They chase the next gust. They thrive in novelty. They spurn settlement, not from caprice, but from soul preservation. And here's the paradox at its core. The eternal dreamer often captivates, enchants, illuminates. They're visionary, intuitive, emotionally expansive. They seem to touch the divine in ways the rooted cannot. And that's precisely why souls are magnetized to them. But nearness unmasks the turbulence. One dawn they're your guiding star, the next they're a vanishing comet. You might believe they're merely untethered, that you can anchor them. But nurturing doesn't root them because the rift isn't external, it's archetypal. Jung reflected, the eternal dreamer is the one who cannot descend, not because they're celestial, but because they cannot endure life's gravity. The tragedy is that they're not deceptive. They simply haven't grounded their essence. Their life is a canopy shielding a fragile, unmoored fragment that was never properly earthed, and so they erect spires of illusion around it. They guard it with mystique. They evade through inspirations, odysseys, reveries, anything but descent, because if they touch down, they might feel the quake they've outrun forever. That quake rumbles, where was the soil when I needed it? Why didn't anyone teach me to stand? Why does grounding feel like burial? And so, like Daedalus crafting wings of wax, they seek refuge in elevation, a sphere where they're never weighed, where life is a vista, not a valley, where bonds are aerial, not anchored, where inspiration soars but never settles. Now, here's the revelation. The eternal dreamer isn't doomed. They're disconnected but full of potential. There's majesty in them. They're visionary, they're attuned. They access cosmic creativity that most have forsaken. But that majesty without roots devolves into frenzy. It scatters. And that's the shadow. The visionary who never materializes. The companion who never fully lands. The innovator who conceives but never constructs. Carl Jung understood this duality profoundly. He believed every psyche must confront this archetype. The goal is not to clip the wings, it's to cultivate roots, to blend the dreamer's elevation with earthly resolve, birthing equilibrium, not elevation alone. So what happens when the dreamer clings to the skies? Inevitably, the illusion plummets. Perhaps they forfeit the vision. Perhaps they sever the tie. Perhaps they awaken one twilight and see they're adrift amid vaporous hopes and unplanted seeds. That's when the inner tempest brews, the realization that you've outflown your own destiny. This is the core paradox of wings without roots. Existence blooms below without you. And finally, you comprehend something shattering. Flight no longer exhilarates, it's exile. This is the psychological horizon every eternal dreamer nears, and two winds diverge. One, they spiral higher, blaming the earth, turning turbulent and evasive. Or two, they fold their wings, they turn earthward and whisper the unspoken. What am I soaring from so desperately? This is where shadow work takes flight, not as escape, but as landing. To root, you don't merely descend, you integrate. You embrace the exile within that yearns for soil, the one petrified of stagnation, the one that simply seeks an embrace. Jung professed integration, not domination, as healing's wingspan. He inscribed, "Until you make the unconscious conscious. It will direct your life and you will call it fate." For the eternal dreamer, the unconscious is a whirlwind of unrooted desires and ungrounded griefs. And until they plant them, they'll unconsciously summon chaos, dissipation, and retreat. The essence is symbolic rooting. They must allow the dreamer within to anchor, not in surrender, but in synergy. They must choose soil over stratosphere, cultivation over chaos, devotion over drift. That's the metamorphosis. The soarer becomes the sower. The visionary becomes the vessel. The dreamer becomes whole, not by forsaking their wings, but by daring to root them in reality. This descent isn't flawless, it's stormy. Grounding for them was never fertile. Stability felt like stagnation. Commitment felt like clipping. So healing isn't just a choice. It's nervous system recalibration. It's wound reclamation. This is why practices like Jungian shadow integration and holistic therapy are vital. They help the eternal dreamer gradually forge inner anchors, offering stability and balance to their boundless inner flight. When this happens, the evolution is profound. They don't lose their altitude, they channel it. They don't cease dreaming, they learn to manifest from the dream. And perhaps most powerfully, they learn to connect, not as a dreamer drifting through souls, but as a rooted force holding space for another's ascent. This is what escaping the paradox truly yields, not confinement, but depth, resilience, and harmony. So to those who feel the eternal dreamer in their veins, this is your call to descend. You needn't clip your wings. You only need to stop fleeing the soil. Yes, rooting aches, but unrooted flight aches deeper because it scatters your essence. And to those entwined with an eternal dreamer, understand this. They're not aiming to unmoor you. They're navigating a sky without a compass. You cannot root them, but you can choose your own earth. And sometimes the most loving act is to let go and allow them to find their landing alone. The wings within you needn't be folded. They need rooting, and once rooted, they don't falter. They become a source of inspired flight, connection, and depth. Not as a paradox, but as paradoxical power. That's what the world needs now. Not more dreamers without roots, but rooted dreamers who choose to soar with purpose. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If this resonated, please consider subscribing for more insights into the soul's landscape.